So welcome back. I'm nothing, but my system crashed. I guess maybe we got a little bit heavy on the subject, and somebody felt that maybe we need to begin editing. So they wanted to edit the whole show for me. So again, thank you for coming back. I see that people are still with me. Uh, Really, if you have any questions, by all means, you could post them on the chat, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. But we were on point 18, point 19. I'm getting a very unstable internet at my end, and I don't know why. I have all the connections going on, but I'll try. If it doesn't work today, I'll pick it up tomorrow, and we'll continue to have this discussion. So again, the United States and Europe project themselves to be the mediators while simultaneously selling weapons to all sides, which again, one of the most sinister person to be. Again, this is I would speak about prophetic statement that woe to the person that actually sells weapons to sides that are in the middle of a conflict or in the middle of civil war and so on. So what we have both Europe and the United States. The United States is as the first and foremost that controls almost 60% of the world trade in weapons and sells weapons to all sides, both direct and indirect, that results in death and destructions. And our economy is a military industrial economy. Item 20. In this way, Europe and the United States can escape its own history, its own violence, its own racism, its own genocide, and continued destruction of the world, while the Muslim, Jews, and Eastern Christians, right, and one can actually add other religions, are posited to be the problem and are a lesser human breed, a human group. So in essence, it legitimizes the continued erasure. So we could actually look and say, look at the this conflict. Why can't people get along? And this is like one of the most I don't know, underhanded statements, like why people can't get along. And uh, this is from in the United States where people, in terms of get along, why can't we get along between blacks and whites in relations to a larger society? Why can't we begin to critique this notion? But by projecting that we are in the ideal and they are the ones in the subhuman, they have not evolved into a civilization, and therefore they continue to have a conflict, makes it possible for us to actually erase every element of our own history, every element of what has taken place, and project this negativity on those that are inhabiting whether Palestine or other regions. So it's very important to us to understand it. Item 21. Zionist Jews are so overtaken and blinded by power, might, and control over Palestine that they don't have the capacity to look in the mirror and to understand what they are actually, what they have uh, uh, arrived at. As their question, what their role they are playing, and how they became a powerful instrument in Western imperialism. Being a junior partner have made it possible for them to flex their muscle. That now is not by the means of the books, by the means of the book Zion rise, but by means of power and might, by fire that Zion rises. But as it rises as an instrument of imperialism, as a negation of moral ethical values, as an embracing of the forces that continues to have deep anti-Semitism toward the Jewish subject and the Muslim subject. And again, the history has to be illustrated and brought to bear that the history of the Muslim world, the history of relations between the Muslim world and the Jewish population throughout history is almost antithetical to European treatment and relations to the Jewish population, to the expulsion, to the ghettos, to the continued demonization of the Jewish subject. And even in the most recent past, again, if there's anybody that wants to examine, just think about the American right wing. Look at Trump, how he instrumentalized anti-Semitism and using it to rally white nationalists in this country, projecting every problem in our American society to a George Soros conspiracy. George Soros, a Jewish billionaire, that he is blamed for every little thing. That you open your car, he is actually the problem. And projecting that and rallying the right wing nationalists in this country, white supremacists, under the guise that George Soros is behind all of this conspiracy that is taking place in our society. This was a whole strategy that was deployed to try to, first in Hungary, to get Orban to be elected on projecting this type of anti Semitic conspiracy that is actually being used as a way to rally white nationalists, white supremacists, the America first, the Europe first, to try to rally them into seats of power and control. Which the ironic thing is to see some of the major mainstream Zionist Jewish organizations that are embracing this, because as long as they express support for Israel, which is one again bizarre type of construct that you actually think of, that white nationalists, white supremacists are illustrating their credentials by declaring their allegiance and support for Israel as a way to prove that they are actually in a position of protecting Western civilization. And I'm asking, uh, Western civilization, is this Western civilization that brought us the genocide? Western civilization of the slave enslavement period, the Western civilization of the putting women on stakes for calling them being sorcerers and magicians, the Western civilization that expelled Muslims and Jews from Europe with the Inquisitions, Western civilization with the scramble for Africa that destroyed and ravaged the continent, Western civilization of World War One, World War Two with the massive death and destruction. So what are you speaking about? And to see some of the Zionists who are happy because somebody is expressing support for Israel at the expense of the Palestinians, seeing them happy to stand next to somebody like Gerd Wilder or somebody like Marie Le Pen or somebody like even Donald Trump, even who says his daughter is married to a Jewish family, and using that while simultaneously pushing every lever of anti-Semitism in the Western imaginary and Western mindset, which often also helps stoke and rationalize that the Jewish community in the diaspora needs to go to Israel. So it becomes a fulfilling circle in this sense. And this is one of the odd historical development that we are witnessing as we speak uh, in this current period. So again, this is item 21 in terms of the blindness that have struck Zionist Jews. And I'm not here, I will actually also separate with some of the Jewish activists, those who have come into an alliance and express solidarity and work with the Palestinians, Jewish Voice for Peace. There are other International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network, and a whole host of others that actually recognize that the history of Jewish communities in the world have had far more positive historical relationship and development in the Muslim world at the time, where Europe continues in the past, and I would argue today, continues to actually illustrate its deep held anti-Semitism, which has also a deep theological uh, basis to it as it relates to the evangelicals, but also mainstream Christian sects that we could also identify the presence of that in their articulation. Item 22, as we watch what is underway and the dispossession in Sheikh Jarrah, let's remind Israel and the Zionists that Palestine and Palestinians will not succumb to colonialism and Zionism. Powerful as it may be, again, you might be, you have built your muscles, being a junior partner of Western powers. You might see that the United States is standing behind you, or Great Britain, or these other societies, and every opportunity they have, they will critique the Palestinians as if it's asymmetrical relationship or power between the powerless, the powerful and the powerless, between the colonized and the colonizer, between those who are oppressed and the oppressor. There is no equality between apartheid South African whites and the black who were actually the victims of South Africa apartheid. In the same way today, I insist there is no equality or symmetrical relationship, right, to be had between apartheid Zionism and apartheid Israel and the use of power and force on the Palestinians and the Palestinian response. No matter what critique we put on the Palestinians, those are not of equal magnitude. And again, Israel has yet to actually confront its original sin, the sin of settler colonialism, the sin of embracing Western colonial powers machinations and accepting to be that junior partner, and into doing so committed itself to genocide of the Palestinians and its continued transfer today. So I would actually call on all of those who want to express solidarity with the Palestinians to understand that dynamic first and foremost before they actually get into what I call the holding hand approach. Say, well, why can't the Palestinians and the Israelis hold hand and sing "We Are the World"? Uh, while I'm appreciative of the notion of singing, and maybe my uh, vocal tunes might not be appreciated, but it's not about a song to be had. It's about ending settler colonialism first and foremost before we could begin to think of a post settler colonialism. We have to decolonize before we actually begin to have a consideration for such ideas. So people want to jump over settler colonialism, want to jump over colonization, want to jump over the fact that we're still in the 21st century talking about settlers coming and taking homes of indigenous Palestinians, of wanting to take families out of their homes in the middle of the night, protected by army, having a Israeli Supreme Court, a court that represents settler colonialism in the first and foremost, coming with a paper to actually evict an indigenous population, where actually one notes is an old woman from Sheikh Jarrah, that her age is longer than the history of the state, the settler colonial state Israel, that is attempting to evict her. That is, in essence, is trying to erase the Palestinian and to erase them by trying to jump over the impact and what settler colonialism is doing and continue to do on the Palestinian. My last piece is the following. I know that there have been many Arab and Muslim organizations, groups, and individuals. They have actually struck an ecumenical deal. That this ecumenical deal that you partner with your local Zionist Jewish organization, you partner with AJC, you partner with ADL, you partner with ACRC, you might be a partner with this peace initiative for building nothingness on top of nothingness. This visitation to try to see how settler colonialism is actually nice because we allow some Palestinians and Muslims to be engaged. So there's this whole notion that is taking place today of an ecumenical deal that you as Muslim, you as an Arab, you might get a seat on the table. But to get on the seat on that table, you have to do certain things. One is that you need to speak about, yes, we understand the suffering of the Palestinians, but we understand the suffering of the Jews, and therefore we have to understand the importance and centrality of Israel in the consciousness and the identity of Jewish Americans. So we'll keep that aside. We will, once a year, we'll come and allow each other to speak about it, but then the rest will have an ecumenical deal that is struck in there. And in return for this, now I understand that the Jewish community, the Zionist Jewish community, has made major strides in the United States. I don't blame them for it. They struggled and they made their path. But the Muslims, in essence, are thinking that somebody's going to open the door for them. So all of a sudden, they're going to be a junior partner in in trying to hope for a white picket fence, to try to actually go up to the White House upon the hill, the ideal city that is there. And this ideal city, in essence, is basically to set your conscience aside, that don't rock the boat and keep Palestine on the side. For that, you will be, given some favorable access. You might be given what you call an article in the New York Times, and you'll become what you call a columnist that writes a column about nothingness on top of nothingness, built on colonial nothingness and settler colonialism, genocide, and transfer. You might also apply for grants, and therefore you become what you call given recommendation from AJC, ADL, and so on that you are really, you have the it, you're like the white cheese, even though that you're dark complexion, but you could understand white cheese and how it functions. So you'd become the junior partner in diversity training, a word that I have came to despise, because it actually, diversity means that you are trying only to put some faces, in essence, to beautify an already an ugly face, an ugly structure, which is white supremacy. So you begin to engage in what you call putting these posters all over the different places where you have so many happy faces of darker complexion individuals, while the edifice itself is rotten to the core. The edifice itself is settler colonialism. The edifice itself is white supremacy. The edifice itself is rationalized as such. So Muslims, again, who want to have a piece of the pie, but as the pie itself is white supremacy. The pie itself is structured around genocide. The pie itself is structured on the dispossession of the indigenous population here in America. The pie itself is actually targeting and using black bodies as a targeted practice within our society without thinking that their death is meaningful or that their death is to be mourned. That's why since George Floyd, we still continue to kill black bodies and riddle them with bullets and rationalize it because, again, the white body is made to be killed and it's not to be understood or to be recognized as a full human being, and therefore that is part of the structure. So unfortunately, some of our Muslims that want to play that role, they accepted that rotten ecumenical deal. And ecumenical deal is, again, you put Palestine aside, you put Palestine on outside the door, and you enter on the table, and you begin to again engage in empty, vacant type of political engagement and discourse. You will be rewarded again. Nobody said that settler colonialism doesn't pay. The evidence, again, Great Britain took $15 trillion out of India. Uh, Settler colonialism and colonialism in general continued to bleed Africa from much of its resources. Africa is one of the richest continents in the world. It has been made impoverished by colonization, post colonization, corporatization, privatization, and continued ravages that is taking place. So, again, what we need is to understand that this is the ecumenical deal that we are striking for a what you call diversity to be at the table and to, in essence, to check our moral and arguments and positions outside the door. And increasingly, this is what is being asked. Right? So, for me, that Muslims are embracing Eurocentric settler colonialism, white supremacist ideal as the normative way of being integrated and assimilated into the American society. And in this sense, again, if that's what you are approaching and that's what you want, ahlan wa sahlan, the door is wide open. And it's been open since Columbus got lost on his way to India and the native discovered that he's lost. But in that is a long trail of dead bodies. And history never remembers those who shine shoes. Uh, History remembers those who actually refuse and resist. And the question for Muslims today is that not only to resist in relations to Palestine, because again, I work on Palestine, but also to resist in relations to Hindutva and Indian nationalism that is partnering with Zionism, to resist in relations to what is taking place in Myanmar, to resist in relations to Syria, Iraq, to resist in relations to Somalia, resist in relations to Libya, but resist also in relations to here, in terms of the dispossession to the indigenous population, that the racism toward our black communities, the continued ravaging of our environment, the continued corporatization of everything, and basically leading down the path of death and destruction. So when we speak about Palestine, I tend to think that every neighborhood that we have in America and other parts of the Western world, there is a Palestine that is in every street. So we could speak about the streets of Jerusalem, but we could speak of the streets of East Oakland, the street of Detroit or Pittsburgh. We could speak about the streets of East London or the streets in the suburbs of Paris. The same type of dynamics of internal colonial representing the external colonial. The same type of police forces that are actually using their power, their knees on the necks of our people in the inner city are the same trainers that are training and working with the Israelis to do the same type of method, the same type of militarization of our police. If you don't understand this link, there is no benefit for you actually to go and think that just praying in the mosque and standing up and doing tarawih while you completely morally and ethically have sold the ethical foundation of what it is to be a person of morals and ethics as a Muslim, then for me that is the calamity. That not only that we have lost the temporality, but we subjugated our spiritual basis for a lost temporality, because nothing of settler colonialism is everlasting. And if you think it is, then again history is what you call exhibit 1, 2, and 3 for you. So again, I see Dustin. Thank you, Dustin, for joining. And you said, may bless you too. And your second comment, I'll read it. This is exactly what we have to break from the traditional nonprofit structure in the US. These things are so embedded in the nonprofit industrial complex. Actually, I spoke and wrote about the nonprofit industrial complex. As you've talked about elsewhere, we need to build our own structures like the Waqf system. Totally agree with you, Dustin, and may Allah bless you, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your fasting, your dua, and your prayers. And definitely, this is a long journey, but the first act we think the first act of transformation is in the mind, right? That's why, again, quoting Biko time and time again, the most dangerous weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. So free your mind first of what you think the other actually can bring you. No one can bring you liberation except your own self, and you don't need to have a double consciousness to think of what the other think of yourself. If you do, then you're no longer free, and you're never going to be free. So the sooner you realize this, the sooner that we realize. I tend to believe Palestine is free. The Arab world is occupied. Israel has been trying for the past 73 years to occupy the Palestinians. They so far have failed. And if you don't understand what is taking place in Jerusalem, then you don't understand the Palestinian struggle from head to toe. Right? The Arab world is colonized and occupied, right? And Israel is still trying to colonize and occupy the Palestinians. They have managed to get some portion of the Palestinian Authority, but this is actually only the few. Palestinians are still resisting and still deal and work as Palestine is free. It's just under temporary constraints by settler colonialism. So Palestine is free. It's just a matter of changing the temporal arrangement for us to come back together and celebrate in Al-Aqsa Mosque when freedom and liberation and self-determination is actualized. So thank you for being with me today. It's been a long night, and I hope that we'll see you tomorrow again. And I'm just commenting, continue to engage in the development on Palestine. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Actually, before I leave, I know that Zakat Foundation is having a major drive right now for Palestine. They just informed me today, and I want to make sure that people actually can support. They're trying to get medical supply as well as support for the Palestinians inside the occupied territories. And I will make sure to put the information on my Facebook so people will actually support it to get the support on the ground for people as they are facing this assault on their okay. So let's see, just 1 second. I'll try to see if I could pull it and put it for people to use and to follow. It's just taken a little bit some time to but again, it is the Zakat Foundation, and they have been doing some good work on both domestically as well as transnationally. So I'll share that on my Facebook and look forward to our continued effort to challenge what is taking place. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.